Welcome dear students. So today we are going to discuss about amino acid metabolism. So we all are aware that the proteins are the most abundant organic compounds and constitute a major part of the body dry weight, that is about 10 to 12 kg in case of adult. So here on the first slide we are able to see it is the overview of body's amino acid pool, sources and the utilization. So you can see over here the body amino acid pool is around 100 grams and the body protein is 10 to 12 kg in adult. So daily the protein is breakdown to amino acids, and the amino acids they uh, form they form a peptide bond and protein synthesis occurs and the proteins are formed. So you can see the protein breakdown, it is around 350 to 400 grams per day, and the synthesis of proteins per day is 300 to 400 grams. So the proteins are they perform a wide variety of functions. It can be a static, structural and dynamic, where the proteins in case of dynamic they are function as the enzymes, hormones, clotting factors, receptors, etc. About half of the body proteins, predominantly collagen, is present in the supportive tissue, that is skeletal and connective, while the other half is intracellular. Proteins are non nitrogen containing molecules consisting of the L alpha amino acids as the repeating units, and we know that there are around 20 amino acids found in protein. Half of them can be synthesized in the body, to them we called as non-essential, and while rest they are provided in the diet, which we to them we called it as essential amino acids. The proteins on degradation, that is proteolysis, they release individual amino acids. The amino acids, they are not just the structural components of proteins. Each one of the 20 naturally occurring amino acids undergoes its own metabolism and performs specific function. So individually the each amino acid it undergoes its own metabolism. Some of the amino acids, they also serve as the precursor for synthesis of biologically important compounds. Example, melanin, serotonin, creatinine. So they are uh, they're used for the synthesis of the biological important compounds. Then certain other amino acids, they may directly act as neurotransmitters. Example, glycine, aspartate, glutamate. So they can act as neurotransmitters. So you can see here body amino acid pool, the regular breakdown, synthesis, then synthesis of non-essential amino acids, then synthesis of carbohydrates from the amino acids, carbohydrates and fats, then synthesis of non-protein compounds which are biologically important. The regular dietary proteins, the intake is around 40 to 100 gram per day, and mainly the protein loss from the body is 30 to 50 gram per day, mostly in the form of urea, and it is uh, eliminated through urine formation. So as an adult, about 100 gram of free amino acid which is present in the amino acid pool of the body. So it is total 100 gram amino acid pool is present. So total turnover, if we say about of the protein, it is estimated that 300 to 400 grams of protein per day is constantly degraded and synthesized, which represents the total body protein turnover. When we are talking about the dietary proteins, there is a regular loss of nitrogen from the body due to degradation of the amino acids. In healthy adults, if the estimated amount is 30 to 50 gram of protein is lost every day. So in adult, around 30 to 50 grams is lost per day, and this amount of protein must therefore be supplied through diet to maintain the nitrogen balance. The purpose of dietary protein is to supply amino acids, particularly the essential ones, for the synthesis of proteins and other nitrogen compounds. There is no storage form of amino acids like we have seen in case of carbohydrates. The carbohydrates, they can be stored in the form of glycogen, and lipids can be stored in the form of triacyl glycerol. So the excess intake of these amino acids are metabolized, oxidized to provide energy, or it can be converted to glucose. This can be converted to glucose or fats, and the amino group are lost as urea and excreted. So the daily protein intake by an adult is 40 to 100 gram to balance the nitrogen content. So protein is digested basically by the proteolytic enzymes to amino acids, which are absorbed in the intestine and enter the body pool of amino acids. The synthesis of non-essential amino acids. So 10 out of 20 naturally occurring amino acids can be synthesized by the body, which contribute to the amino acid pool. And generally, about 10 to 15% of body energy requirements are met from the amino acids. So daily 10 to 15% body energy requirements are met from the amino acids. The amino acids are converted to carbohydrates and fats, and this becomes the predominant when the protein consumption is in excess. So whenever we take there is high protein diet, so proteins, they break down to amino acids, and these amino acids are getting converted to carbohydrates and fats. So in the overview, the again I'm repeating, the body protein is 10 to 12 kg in adult. So daily around 350 to 400 gram per day the protein is broken down to amino acids, and daily the amino acids, they form protein synthesis, that is also around 300 to 400 gram per day. So dietary intake is 40 to 100 gram per day, and the amino acids cannot be stored in the body as we can store the carbohydrates like glycogen in the form of glycogen, the fats in the form of triacylglycerols, and therefore it is excreted in the form of urea and urea in the urine. And the energy for 10 to 15% of the body daily requirement is of energy is from the amino acids. Also the amino acids, they are used for the synthesis of the non-protein compounds, that is around 30 gram per day, like for example creatinine, porphyrines, phospholipids, purines, pyrimidines, etc. And also it is used for the synthesis of non-essential amino acids. Now next is the main and important reactions in case of amino acids which are observed are transamination followed by deamination and decarboxylation reaction. So if you see, the amino acid undergoes common reactions like transamination followed by deamination for the liberation of ammonia. So just now we have seen over here the amino acids, the protein loss from the body is 30 to 50 gram per day. So the here urea is formed and it is excreted. So intermediate step is the formation of liberation of ammonia. So if you see this left side diagram, what you are able to see here in the diagram is, here you have the amino acid from the dietary protein, from the body protein, then protein synthesis from the amino acids, synthesis of different nitrogen containing compounds, and these amino acid gets converted to keto acid by the reaction called as transamination. So this reaction is called as transamination, and this keto acid which is formed, it is utilized for the generation of energy, that is utilized for formation of glucose, then formation of fats, and also it is utilized for formation of non-essential amino acids. And you can see here in this reaction, the alpha ketoglutarate is being converted to glutamate, and this glutamate on then deamination forms ammonia, and that ammonia is getting converted to urea, which is excreted from the body. So the important key point over here, we cannot store ammonia as in case of carbohydrates and lipids like glycogen and triacyl glycerols, and therefore whenever there is excess of ammonia present, whenever there is excess of nitrogen content in the body, the excess can be eliminated from the body. So the carbon skeleton of amino acid first converted to keto acids which meet following fate. So it is utilized to generate energy. It is used for the synthesis of glucose, diverted for the formation of fat or ketone bodies, and is involved in the production of non-essential amino acids. So the salient features of transamination reaction, the transaminase requires pyridoxal phosphate, that is PLP, as a coenzyme derived from vitamin B6. So you can see here the this is the detailed reaction. So the salient features are, first is it requires the coenzyme, that is pyridoxal phosphate. The second salient feature is specific transaminases exist for each pair of amino and keto acid. However, only two, namely aspartate transaminases and alanine transaminases, make a significant contribution for transamination reaction. Then the third feature is there is no free ammonia liberated, only the transfer of ammonia group occurs. So here in this reaction there is no free ammonia liberated, only the transfer of ammonia from one amino acid to another is observed, and this transamination reaction is reversible. So you can see over here the transamination reaction is reversible. The next feature is it is very important for the redistribution of amino group and production of non-essential amino acids as per the requirement of the cell. Also, the transamination diverts the excess amino acids towards the energy generation. And the last important feature is the amino acid undergoes transamination to finally concentrate nitrogen in glutamate, and glutamate is the only amino acid that undergoes oxidative deamination to significant extent to liberate the free ammonia for urea synthesis. So again I am repeating the important features of transamination reaction. First, it requires pyridoxal phosphate as the coenzyme. Then second, the specific transaminases exist for each pair of amino and keto acids. So which are those specific transaminases? First is aspartate transaminases, and second is alanine transaminases. Then third is there is no liberation of free ammonia group in this reaction, transamination reaction. Only the transfer of ammonia from one to another occurs. The next important feature is it is irreversible. So this reaction is irreversible. Next is uh, the transamination. It is very important for the redistribution of amino groups and production of non-essential amino acids. Also, it is very important for generation of energy and formation of glutamate. So glutamate is the only amino acid that undergoes oxidative deamination to a significant extent to liberate free ammonia for urea synthesis. So now just have a look at this diagram or the reaction, you can say. So you are able to see here you have the amino acid, that is alanine. Then it is getting converted to pyruvate by the action of enzyme glutamate pyruvate transaminases. So what is observed here, you can see the main important functional groups, they are highlighted with the color coding. So here ammonia, it is indicated with red color, and the carbonyl group is indicated with blue color. So the conversion of alanine to pyruvate, which is reversible, ammonia group is removed, and here you can say in the pyruvate you have the carbonyl group, and therefore this is called as transamination reaction. What is transamination? You can read over here: transfer of amino group from amino acid. So this is your amino acid. So transfer of amino group from amino acid to keto acid is known as transamination. And as we have discussed in the salient features, the important coenzyme for this reaction is pyridoxal phosphate. So you can see here, this is also a reversible conversion where the pyridoxal phosphate is getting converted to pyridoxamine phosphate. So in pyridoxal phosphate, since here it is ZAL, it indicates it contains the aldehyde functional group. So it gets converted to pyridoxamine phosphate. So aldehyde is getting converted to amines by the action of enzyme glutamine pyruvate transaminase. So amine group from the alanine is transferred to pyridoxal phosphate and it forms pyridoxamine phosphate. Again further, this pyridoxamine phosphate gets converted back to pyridoxal phosphate by the action of enzyme glutamate pyruvate transaminases. And here the alpha ketoglutarate, it contains the carbonyl group. So the carbonyl group, here the oxygen is being replaced with the amine and it forms glutamate. So basically therefore it is called as the transamination, means transfer of amino group from amino acid to keto acid. So here you can see here it is keto acid again to amino acid. So alanine to pyruvate and here alpha ketoglutarate to glutamate. And therefore this is the important reaction. So you can read it over here. Mechanism, it occurs in two stages: transfer of amino group to the coenzyme pyridoxal phosphate to form pyridoxamine phosphate. And then in the second stage, amino group of pyridoxamine phosphate is then transferred to keto acid to produce a new amino acid, and the enzyme with PLP is regenerated. So new amino acid, that is glutamate, is formed. Now here in the second case, you can see you have the enzyme which contains the specific lysine residue, and you have the pyridoxal phosphate. So whenever you have the amines containing nitrogens and the pyridoxal phosphate, that is the coenzyme, they interact and they form Schiff's bases. And when the next amino acid enters, it displaces that and it forms the Schiff's bases. So you can read it over here. The aldehyde group of pyridoxal phosphate is linked with amino group of lysine residue at the active site of the enzyme, forming a Schiff's base. When amino acid come in contact with enzyme, it displaces lysine. So here it displaces lysine and new Schiff's base linkage is formed. So the amino acid PLP, that is pyridoxal phosphate, Schiff's base tightly binds with the enzyme by non-covalent forces. So this is called as transamination reaction. So it is very important reaction because there is a transfer of amino group. So it is involved in the energy generation, glutamate formation, then the production of non-essential amino acids. It is irreversible. Then it requires the coenzyme, that is pyridoxal phosphate, and there is no liberation of ammonia, only the transfer of ammonia occurs. So what is the clinical significance of this transaminases? So the clinical significance is aspartate transaminase and alanine transaminase. They are the important diagnostic enzymes. So alanine we have used in aspartate. So the aspartate transaminase and alanine transaminases are important diagnostic enzymes. And serum aspartate transaminase is mostly elevated in case of cardiac disorders, or you can say in case of myocardial infarction, while alanine transaminase is increased in liver disease, that is in case of viral hepatitis. So that is the clinical significance. These enzymes plays very important role in case of characteristic disorders. The concentration of this enzyme increases and we can detect the trigger of the specific disorder. So we have discussed about transamination reaction. Now we are going to discuss about the deamination reaction. So here on the screen you can see uh, the oxidation of glutamate by glutamate dehydrogenase enzyme. So this is GDH, stands for glutamate dehydrogenase. So L-glutamate, it gets converted to alpha aminoglutarate and this gets converted to alpha ketoglutarate. So let's see first what is deamination. So deamination stands for removal of amino group from amino acid as ammonia for urea synthesis, and carbon skeleton of amino acid is converted to keto acid. So this is the amino acid, that is L-glutamate, which is converted to alpha keto glutarate, that is your keto acid. So this is keto functional group, that is carbonyl group, and the acid is formed. So what is happening in the first step? The amine containing amino acid, that is L-glutamate, in presence of enzyme, that is GDH, glutamate dehydrogenase, it requires the coenzyme, that is NAD plus and NADPH. It gets converted into intermediate, that is alpha aminoglutarate, and this on removal of the water molecule, it releases the, this is the addition of water molecule here, the arrow is wrong. So it releases the ammonia in the form of NH4 plus ions. So transamination involves only the shuffling of amino group among the amino acids. On the another hand, so we can see here, deamination results in liberation of ammonia for urea synthesis. So here NH4 plus, it is liberated and further centers for urea synthesis. So simultaneously, the carbon skeleton of amino acid is converted to keto acid. So amino acid is converted to keto acid, and deamination may be either oxidative or non-oxidative. So we are going to see what is the oxidative deamination and what is the non-oxidative deamination. The transamination and deamination, they occur simultaneously. Therefore, some of the authors, they can use the term that is trans deamination. So let's see what is oxidative deamination. Oxidative deamination is the liberation of free ammonia from the amino group of amino acid coupled with oxidation. So liberation of free ammonia from amino group of amino acid coupled with oxidation, and this takes place mostly in the liver and the kidney. So the purpose of oxidative deamination is to provide ammonia for urea synthesis and alpha keto acid for variety of reactions including energy generation. So what is the role of glutamate dehydrogenase over here? So glutamate dehydrogenase, the L-glutamate, it undergoes oxidative deamination catalyzed by glutamate dehydrogenase to liberate ammonia, and it utilizes the NAD plus or NADP plus as coenzyme, and the GDH enzyme catalyzed reaction is very important as it reversibly links to glutamate metabolism with TCA cycle through ketoglutarate to liberate the energy. So alpha ketoglutarate, it is one of the intermediate in the TCA cycle which enters into TCA cycle and which is responsible for the generation of energy. So this reaction, it is oxidative deamination reaction. So the role of glutamate dehydrogenase over here, just now we have discussed. The conversion of glutamate to alpha ketoglutarate occurs through the formation of intermediate, that is alpha amino glutarate, and the regulation of this enzyme, that is glutamate dehydrogenase, is this enzyme is zinc containing mitochondrial enzyme, so it is isolated, identified in mitochondria. GDH is controlled by the allosteric regulations. GTP and ATP inhibits, whereas the GDP and ADP activates this enzyme. Steroids and thyroid hormones, they also inhibit the GDH enzyme. And the another important part of this enzyme is after ingestion of protein rich meal, the liver glutamate level is elevated. So whenever we take protein rich diet, the liver glutamate level increases. So it is converted to, this glutamate is converted to alpha ketoglutarate with the liberation of ammonia. Further, when the cellular energy levels are low, the degradation of glutamate is increased. So glutamate degradation is increased to provide alpha ketoglutarate, which enters into TCA cycle to liberate the energy. So the this is very important whenever we take the protein diet with high protein content. So it gets converted to alpha ketoglutarate, the liver glutamate, it gets converted to alpha ketoglutarate and liberation of ammonia, which is observed, that is oxidative deamination. And also whenever there is need of energy, so whenever there is need of energy, there in that situation also the oxidative deamination occurs to form alpha ketoglutarate, and then this enters into TCA cycle through liberate the energy. Now next is oxidative deamination by amino acid oxidases. So here the enzyme involved, it was the glutamate dehydrogenases. Here the enzyme involved is amino acid oxidases. So on the left side you can see the L amino acid is being converted to, the L amino acid is being converted to alpha keto acid in presence of enzyme, that is L amino acid oxidases, and the coenzymes involved are FMN2, FMNH2, and also the oxygen molecule is getting converted to hydrogen peroxide. So we can read it over here. So only the difference between the previous reaction, deamination reaction, here the enzyme is glutamate dehydrogenase and here the enzyme is L-amino acid oxidases. In both the cases, it is the deamination reaction. So if you read it over here, the L-amino acid oxidase, the enzyme, and D-amino acid oxidase. So you can see here in the second reaction, the enzyme which is used is D-amino acid oxidase. They are flavoproteins containing FMN and FAD. So flavin mononucleotide and flavin adenosine dinucleotide. They act on corresponding amino acid to produce alpha keto acid and ammonia. So here you can see there is a formation of alpha keto acid and ammonia, and here also the D amino acids will be acted upon by D amino acid oxidases to form alpha keto acids. In this, oxygen is reduced. So in the first reaction, the oxygen is reduced to hydrogen peroxide, which is decomposed by the enzyme catalysis again back to oxygen, and the water molecule is removed. And the activity of L-amino oxidases is low. So the activity of this enzyme is low as compared to the D-amino oxidases. So if you see the action of D-amino oxidases, the D-amino acids will be acted upon by the enzyme D-amino acid oxidase, and the flavoprotein is FAD getting converted to FADH2, and the water molecule is getting converted and it liberates the ammonia to form keto acids, and these keto acids then undergoes again transaminases reaction to form L-amino acid. So this is the conversion of D amino acids to L amino acids. So and further in the another pathway, the alpha keto acids, they are used for the formation of glucose and fats and to liberate the energy. So D-amino acids are found in plants and microorganisms. They are, however, not present in mammalian proteins, but D-amino acids are regularly taken in the diet and metabolized by the body. So we have discussed about deamination reaction, and into that it is the oxidative deamination reaction with two different enzymes. One of the enzyme is glutamate dehydrogenase and second is oxidases. Now we'll see non-oxidative deamination reaction. So what is non-oxidative deamination reactions? So some amino acids can be deaminated to liberate ammonia without undergoing oxidation. So oxidation is not going to happen over here. So if you see the first, that is first enzyme involved is amino acid dehydrases. So you, on the left side you can see here you have the different amino acids, that is serine, threonine, homocysteine, and will be acted upon by the enzyme dehydratase, and they give the respective alpha keto acid and the ammonia is liberated. So serine, threonine, and homoserine are the hydroxy amino acids. So these are the hydroxy amino acids. They undergo non-oxidative deamination catalyzed by PLP dependent dehydrases, or also called as dehydratase. Then second is amino acid desulfhydrases. So the sulfur containing amino acids, for example cysteine and homocysteine, they undergo deamination coupled with desulfhydration to give keto acid. So cysteine is getting converted to pyruvate. So desulfhydration. So sulfhydryl group is also removed and ammonia is also liberated, and it is acted upon by the enzyme desulfhydrases. Then the third enzyme which is involved is histidases. So you can see deamination of histidine. The enzyme histidase acts on histidine to liberate ammonia by non-oxidative deamination process. So histidine acted upon by the enzyme histidase to give urocanate and the ammonia is liberated. So these are non-oxidative deamination reaction, and the enzyme involved are dehydratase, desulfidrases, and histidases. Next is decarboxylation reaction. So we have discussed transamination and deamination reaction. Now decarboxylation, so related to carboxylate group. So you can see the decarboxylation of amino acid or their derivatives results in the formation of amines. So amino acid on decarboxylation, you can see here carboxylate group, it is removed uh, by liberation of carbon dioxide, and it is acted upon by the enzyme decarboxylase. It requires the coenzyme, that is pyridoxal phosphate, and it forms amine. So there are different examples. For example, if you see here the L-histidine, so it contains it is acted upon by the enzyme, that is L-histidine decarboxylase. So you can see here the removal of carbon dioxide here, and forms histamine. So the amino acid, it forms histamine by the action of enzyme decarboxylase. Now second example is cysteine, which is oxidized to sulfoalanine, and then by the action of enzyme decarboxylase, it forms taurine. If you see the third example, that is the amino acid which is tryptophan, it is acted upon by the enzyme tryptophan hydroxylase. So you can see the aromatic ring here, there is no hydroxyl group on the aromatic ring, but here you can see the aromatic ring, it contains the hydroxyl group. So first step is hydroxylase, hydroxylation of aromatic ring to form 5-hydroxytryptophan, and then decarboxylation occurs and it forms 5-hydroxytryptamine. So these are the decarboxylation reactions. So when we are talking about metabolism, first reaction we have discussed, that is transamination, second is deamination, and third is decarboxylation. So here you can see the table which indicates the biogenic amines and their functions. So just now we have seen histidine, then tryptophan. So let's see the uses. The amino acid is histidine and the amine form is histamine. So histidine and the amine form is histamine. And what is the function? It function as vasodilator. It promotes the gastric HCl content and pepsin synthesis. Now, second example, tryptophan. So it forms tryptamine. Also, it can form serotonin, melatonin. So what is the role? It elevates blood pressure. It stimulates cerebral activity and circadian rhythm. So these are the different functions of these different amino acids and their corresponding amines. Now, next is the metabolism of ammonia. So just now we have discussed about the liberation of free ammonia. Now next is how the ammonia is getting metabolized. So ammonia is constantly liberated from different reactions, metabolism of amino acids, and exists in the form of NH4 plus ions. So there are 5 to 6 points to be discussed over here. For example, first is formation of ammonia, so how it is formed. Then second is the transport and storage of ammonia. Then third is function of ammonia, then disposal, and in last, what is the toxicity caused by the ammonia. So first part, the function, the formation of ammonia. Just now we have discussed the two reactions, that is transamination and deamination. So it leads to the formation of ammonia. Second is the transport and storage of ammonia. So despite a regular and constant production of ammonia from various tissues, its concentration in the circulation is surprisingly low, that is around normal plasma level of 15 to 45 microgram per deciliter. So this is because of body has the efficient mechanism for ammonia transport and its immediate utilization for urea synthesis. So the transport of ammonia between various tissues and the liver mostly occurs in the form of glutamine or alanine and not as free ammonia. So your glutamine is the main storage house of ammonia. So you can see over here, this indicates the synthesis of glutamine and its conversion to glutamate, the reaction which is independent and irreversible. So glutamine is getting converted to glutamate is getting converted to glutamine. So you can see here the carboxylate group, carbonyl. So here it is the amine getting attached, and the enzyme involved is glutamine synthetase. So there is uh, ammonia being added up and water molecule is getting liberated. So energy is required, ATP is getting converted to ADP, and this happens in presence of the magnesium ion. And this glutamine can be further converted to glutamate by the action of enzyme glutaminase. So the conversion of water and liberation of ammonia. So basically, glutamine is the storehouse of ammonia and is present at highest concentration in the blood among the amino acids. So glutamine is serve as the storage and transport form of ammonia. Its synthesis mostly occurs in liver, brain and muscles. So ammonia is removed from the brain predominantly as glutamine. So this is from ammonia, it is removed in the form of glutamine, and glutamine is freely diffusible in tissues and hence easily it can be transported. So glutamine synthetase is the enzyme is responsible for the synthesis of glutamine from glutamate and ammonia, and this reaction is unidirectional and requires ATP and the magnesium ions. The next is the function of ammonia. So it's involved in the synthesis of essential synthesis of non-essential amino acids, for example purines, pyrimidines, amino sugars, asparagine, etc. So ammonium ions are important to maintain the acid base balance of the body. So this is very important that the ammonia, it is used to maintain the acid base balance of the body. So next part is the in the metabolism of ammonia is the disposal. So the organisms during the course of evolution have developed different mechanisms for the disposal of ammonia from the body. So in case in the animals, it is regarded as in three different types. First is ammonotelic. So the aquatic animals dispose of ammonia into the surrounding water, that is called as ammonotelic. When the reptiles and birds, they dispose of the ammonia, it is called as uricotelic. And when it is mammals, then it is called as ureotelic. So the disposal in humans, urea is formed from ammonia, and urea is non-toxic, it is soluble and it can be easily excreted. So in mammals it is called as ureotelic. So this is disposal is ureotelic, that is converting ammonia to urea. Urea is non-toxic, it is water soluble, it can be easily excreted. In case of reptiles and birds it is called as uricotelic, and in case of aquatic animals it is called as ammonotelic. The next part is the toxicity of ammonia. So elevation of ammonia concentration is harmful to the brain. Accumulation results in slurring of speech and blurring of vision. And in hyperammonemia, so where the ammonia concentration is higher than the normal level, it may lead to coma and finally death like situation. So it is really very important to discuss over here about the toxicity of ammonia, hyperammonemia. So elevation of plasma ammonia than the normal range, as we have discussed over here, it is 15 to 45 microgram per deciliter. So impairment in the urea synthesis. So when the ammonia concentration can increase in the body, so we have discussed that ammonia is disposed in the form of urea. So if there is any defect in the formation of urea, that can lead to increase in the concentration of ammonia in the body. So impairment in the urea synthesis due to defect in any one of the enzymes in the urea synthesis. All these disorders lead to hyperammonemia and cause hepatic coma and mental retardation. The acquired hyperammonemia may due to hepatitis or alcoholism, where the urea synthesis becomes defective and hence ammonia accumulates. So if the ammonia concentration is increased, then why it leads to toxicity? So if you remember, we have discussed the reaction where alpha ketoglutarate reacts with ammonia to form glutamate. So just we'll go back. So this is reversible reaction where alpha ketoglutarate reacts with ammonia and it forms the glutamate. So accumulation of ammonia shifts the equilibrium of this reaction to the right with more glutamate formation. So here alpha ketoglutarate, if ammonia is increased, it leads to formation of glutamate. So concentration of glutamate in the body will increase. Hence, more utilization of alpha ketoglutarate is observed, and we know that the alpha ketoglutarate is the important precursor for the key. It is important intermediate in TCA cycle, and it leads to depleted levels depleted levels impairs the TCA cycle. So TCA cycle is hampered and therefore the less molecules of ATP will be generated or no net results in the production of energy in the form of ATP by the brain is observed, and this leads to toxic effect of ammonia in the brain, and therefore due to impairment in ATP formation is observed. So how to tackle this situation? If the ammonia concentration is increased in the body and it is at high level in the brain, because glutamate is formed and alpha ketoglutarate is reduced, and alpha ketoglutarate is reduced, because of which the TCA cycle, the ATP generation is reduced. So trapping and elimination of ammonia is required, and that can be done by intravenous administration of sodium benzoate and phenyl acetate is given. These compounds can condense with glycine and glutamate to form water soluble products that can be easily excreted, and by this way the concentration of ammonia in the body can be removed by trapping. The next thing is uh, liver failure causes hyperammonemia. So here one of the reason, if ammonia concentration is increased, then alpha ketoglutarate and glutamate concentration, so ATP that we have discussed. Next thing is if there is liver failure, that also leads to hyperammonemia, and that leads to hepatic coma condition. So the management of this situation is done by first, that is the restriction of protein diet. So protein diet is controlled, then use of antibiotics for bowel disinfection, then proper maintenance of acid base balance, and avoiding the use of hepatotoxic drug. So that is about the metabolism of ammonia. So here we have discussed the formation of ammonia, transport, its storage, then function of ammonia, then disposal, and the toxicity of ammonia. So we'll stop over here. The next part will continue in the next lecture.